Oh, what did you say? I got it out. Well, hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to Well Said with Kim and Vic. I'm Kim.
And I'm Vic.
And today we're actually going to be talking to you about the Constitution. And Vic has a very important announcement to make.
Yes, guys, I won't be talking too much today. You guys pray for me. I'm under the weather a little bit. I'm having a little sinus infection that's really. Anyways, today, I just want to remind you guys that this week it is school choice week. And with that being said, there is a school that will be opening 2022. A good friend of mine.
Of ours,
yeah. She's on the board, and she's she's a Christian woman.
Shout out to Lisa
and she
Matthews.
has a heart for America and a heart for children. And so please look up that Dogwood Classical Academy. Okay, Dogwood Classical Academy. And what we're going to be doing, we're going to have that link. Okay? In the description.
I'm new to this tech thing.
And so that you guys can go and you can register to get further information concerning it, signing up for the school for your children, being first come, first served, like we're here with seeking educational excellence. And only thing that we like to do is just turn on the light. And then you can find the door. And once you find the door, it's up to you to do the rest of the work.
It depends on how well you can see.
We just like turning on the light for you. You know what I'm saying? In a dark room so you can find the door. And I'm not going to hold you too much longer. I'm not going to hold you long at all. I'm just going to let Kim get right into this because there's a lot of stuff that we want to get into concerning this Constitution. You don't have to pay for a constitutional class, people. I want you to know that. You do not have to pay these sites for these constitutional classes. And I'm seeing this, that they're charging people money, okay, up to maybe $50, $25 to $50 for a class. Whereas that Hillsdale
College
gives it for free.
Yes.
And then they have modules. And then you can get credit for it, where it's like a credited slip that you have passed the class. So, and you can do it on your time. So We're just going to get into this on this point. But if you like further information, we're going to have that down in the bottom too. And then it'll take you to where you need to go to continue to explore. Okay, Kim, let them have it.
She's still going to be here and commenting. So she's going to be here, but she's let me run the show today. Because this is a presentation I did for one of our local clubs last year. I actually took the class with Hillsdale College. It's an excellent college. They're about principles and capitalism and teaching character. And it's one of the premier colleges in the country. They don't take any federal money, which is great. So that means they work on donations, which is an awesome thing too. So this course that I took was called Constitution 101. So I'm gonna give all the credit to Hillsdale because what I learned from this course came from them. So I highly recommend. I'll put a link in the description afterwards. So if you're coming back to the channel to look at this live or you want that information, I should have it up. Hi, Rashawn Burns. Thanks.
Before you go into that, there was another a message that was sent to me that Lisa had sent to me concerning that their curriculum is connected. That's the great thing about it because they deal with a lot of historical content within their curriculum. They are partnering up the school, Dogwood Classical Academy. Their curriculum is coming out of
Hillsdale College.
So I would just encourage you parents.
Go check out Hillsdale.
Go check out Hillsdale. Check out that Dogwood Classical Academy. They sent me a link. That there is a link down in YouTube, right under this right here. They were telling me that. And I said,
it's coming. It's coming.
And they said the YouTube channel, they said there is a link below that takes you to some YouTube video that describes their school. I will also go to their website. please feel free to call this number, 704-576-4268. That number once again is 704-576-4268. Okay, for any other questions pertaining to that Dogwood Classic Academy. I can't wait to see that school.
Yeah, so if you're a parent here in North Carolina in the Charlotte area,
yes,
definitely check it out, because this school, I'm going to actually check it out for my granddaughter who's here in Charlotte with me. So shout out, to Lisa Matthews and what they're doing. Yeah. As conservatives, we have to understand that a lot of the issues, unfortunately, in our culture today come from academia and what's being taught or how our kids are being indoctrinated. You make sure you go and check out our other series about parental involvement, school choice.
Yes.
We actually we had somebody come up with a new term instead of school choice, parent choice. And it actually came from an educator that we met last week. And that's really what it's about. Yeah. It's about the parents being able to choose what's best for their children. Yeah. The government has nothing to do with that. No. As parents, it's up to us to decide what's best for our children.
And the thing about it is, Kim, the thing about why it's so best for the government to stay out of it, because you see with this vaccination that's happening, going back to school, not going back to school. This is all just a ruse to keep our children out of school, keep them separated, bringing anxiety, bringing a whole bunch of mental issues with this. But I can chatter on, girl. I can chatter on about this all day, but we're not here today with that. We're here for the Constitution. Right. I want her to bring it straight to my head because I love hearing about it.
Now, here's the other thing, too, about this channel, Seeking Educational Excellence. For those of you who are here for the first time, check out the website, seekingeducationalexcellence.org. Shout out to Kevin Jackson for giving us this platform to be able to share how we see fit on issues that we think concerned, especially education.
Yes.
And Seeking Educational Excellence focuses on K through 12 education. And one of the missions or the goals is to bring critical thinking skills back to the schools. Yeah. To get rid of, to help offset the agenda that's in the schools now that it basically indoctrinates our children. When you look at young people these days who think socialism is a good thing, in spite of the historical fact that socialism usually kills people and kills economies. So that's the main mission of us here at Seeking Educational Excellence. So having said that, that's why I thought it would be a good idea for us to talk about the Constitution, because that's not taught. And if I speak honestly, even when I was in school, I didn't learn a lot about the Constitution. I knew about it. But I didn't know what the, first 3 articles were of the Constitution. I didn't know what the Bill of Rights, you heard it, but you never knew what it was. So in taking the class with Hillsdale, I learned a lot. So I'm hoping that you guys can learn a little bit, today with what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the theory of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, right? So the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Independence actually comes in 3 parts, and it deals with final causes, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And the Constitution has 7 articles, and it deals with formal causes. So the Declaration of Independence lists, basically, it was the colonists or, the new country, the Americans, wanting to separate from the British. So for the first several hundred years of our existence, we were under British rule. We were considered an extension of the British Empire. And even at that time, there were many Americans who wanted to stay with the British Empire. And then there were a lot of Americans who didn't, because the king was ruling with a heavy-handed fist, like a dictator. So what the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence sought to do, it listed what the king was doing wrong, right? He interfered with the legislature and wrongfully imprisoned citizens. Does that look familiar to that? Like, I'm looking at some people who are, government. Yes. And I don't know if you guys are paying attention to what's going on now. Some conservatives, prominent conservatives, have been arrested because they were actually at the Capitol on January 6th. They didn't do anything wrong. They just happen to be there.
Protesting.
So, right. Which is our constitutional right. Peaceful protesting.
Yes.
And they were. We're not talking about the people who went into the building and did anything destructive. These were people who were outside, and there was a high profile, I don't want to say he's a conservative, but he is definitely pro-America, pro-Trump. And he believes in liberty and freedom, pro-freedom, those types of things. And he recently got arrested by the FBI. So, and I think about the tyrannical nature of the king at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about final causes, it's the ultimate purpose these are the ultimate purposes that people are willing to, die for.
Mm-hmm.
So things like freedom, like we talk about liberty, because these are things that are given to us by our creator. These are not government given things.
Yes.
These are things that are given to us by God, and that's what, if you think about it in the Declaration of Independence, it talks about the freedom to the pursuit of happiness. We have unalienable rights given to us by our creator.
We've been endowed with certain inalienable rights.
Exactly.
And these rights are life,
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thanks, sis. I appreciate it. Well said. I drew a blank at that point, but see, that's why we need each other like that. So the beauty of the founding fathers, and I know a lot of people talk about the founding fathers had slaves and stuff like that, and that's a part I'll address, but they still had the wherewithal to deal with that later on. They made provisions in the Constitution with the amendment process, which is really great, because you got to think about, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which dealt with slavery. But they knew at the time, even when the Union was formed, that was something that they would deal with later. But they still had the wherewithal to understand that representative government is better than a pure democracy. See, a lot of people have it wrong. Pure democracies are not the optimum type government, because that means majority rules, right? Mm-hmm. The majority can be tyrannical. That's right. So that means that if a bunch of people get together and decide they want to take your land, they can. Take your land. Yeah. Because it's the majority, right? Yeah. So with representative government, which the founders understood, it was better to have representatives represent a group of people. And in that way, that would open up the public forum, and you could have discussions, and things can't just be changed at the whim of a whole bunch of people. Yeah. So you got to think about that. That to me was very wise. Mm-hmm. And the United States is the first government in this world that had that type of government, because usually it was monarchies, democracy. Old Greece was formed on a democracy, and it failed. Mm-hmm. Rome, these were, and the founding fathers were very learned men, and they understood that. So when people talk about we have a democracy, we don't. We have a representative constitutional republic. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the Constitution is what we call our formal cause, right? So what I was just talking about was our final causes, those things that are in us that we're willing to die for: liberty, freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all freedom of these things that are given to us by God, not by government. Mm-hmm. So then you have your formal causes, and that's government. But government is created. So the Constitution forms a government and how it's going to work. It formed the three branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. It's different from the Declaration, because the Declaration of Independence talks about our final causes, where the articles in the Constitution talks about our formal causes. This is what forms the government, right? It's that necessary evil we need, unfortunately. It's like that yin and that yang. Yes. Yes. So what I loved about the Constitution and how it formed our government, how they call it the Great American Experiment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, unfortunately, these days we've gotten so far away from the original intent of the Constitution where we are now. And I think that's a lot of the things that a lot of the pro-freedom, pro-American people are fighting for, is that the government has gotten way too big and way too powerful. And this was the very thing that the founding fathers were trying to avoid, right? Yes. So, and then what I learned too doing this is that we started settling in this country 150 years before the Declaration. So we were here and still under the rule of the British. So the 7 articles of the Constitution, in the first 3, they set up the 3 branches of government. Like I said, you'll hear people talking about Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 2, and Article 3. So these are the different articles that set up the different branches of the Constitution. So you'll hear that referred to a lot. I highly recommend, if you can get a copy of the Constitution, just to go read it. And it's online. It's real easy to access.
Right here on my shelf, I got a little book. It's a little pamphlet book of the Constitution, and you can read it. It's not what, pennies on the dollar, $2 for the little Constitution book in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. So basically, what we're saying too is that the way the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was set up, that all the power belongs to the people, not the government. Mm-hmm. The people, through their representatives, get to dictate what the government does. And we are governed by consent. There's a term called consent of the governed. Mm-hmm. That's us. We allow the government to exist because we consent to it. The representatives work for us. It's not the other way around. You wouldn't know that these days because you think it's the representatives.
Yeah, because once you send them into office, they just take control. They act like you never sent them there.
Yeah. So that was the foundation of how the Constitution, how it's set up. That's just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. So then we come to the American Revolution, right? This is when the colonists started to get tired of the British rule. And the tyrant, was it King George? Whatever.
It's time to go.
So one of the things that I learned was that the relationship between the colonists and the British changed after the French-Indian War in 1763. The colonists wanted to be free and had a doctrine of natural rights. See, this is the precursor to the Declaration of Independence. And the natural law, which is based on universal law, right? We understand universal law. We understand right from wrong and those types of things. And natural law had been around since the early 1700s. The British felt the colonists were part of the empire, and many states have similar doctrines in their constitution. So many of the states already had these natural rights, these natural laws that they felt were only right to have, and that the king was overseeing. Yeah, he started getting tired of them, his tyrannical ways. You know, y'all know the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, and those types of things. That the king started, overtaxing the colonists, and they weren't able to survive. So the governed citizens felt like they had the right to say who can become a fellow citizen from another government via immigration and foreign policy. The government domestic policy is to create laws to protect citizens from harm from fellow citizens. So that's to say that during this period leading up to the Constitution, the American colonists already started to believe a lot of the things that are in place now. You got to consider. So they started to think about being protected from other foreign countries. That's part of what the government is supposed to do. They do immigration, they do foreign policy, and all that kind of stuff. So under the British rule, the king was dictating all of that. So, and then you still have some colonists, or some of the colonists who still believed in being part of the British government, but you had a lot of people in the new country, Americans, who wanted not to be part of British, or at least not wanted to be under British rule. So that was something very interesting that I found out. So we, fast forward to, and you got to think this was kind of like a turning point in American history when leading up to the revolution, because the country was created. They actually fled England for freedom of religion. They were being persecuted, the Puritans, the Pilgrims, and all of them. They were being persecuted by the British government because the British government had established the church, the Catholic Church. No, it was the Protestant church, I think, because they broke off from the Catholic Church, but they had their new church, and they felt like that new church should rule the citizens. And a lot of people weren't Protestant, a lot of people were Catholic, and they felt like that their religious freedoms were being taken. So they fled to the New World for religious freedom. And the cool thing that I learned listening to some during that time, it's so funny that they came for religious freedom, but a lot of them were dogmatic religiously, right? They felt like the very thing they were running from in some of the colonies, they were persecuting people who didn't believe what they believe. It's so funny. Human nature is so funny. But I digress. But that was why they came. And so when the founding fathers decided to put together the Constitution, you got to think about it. Now, all of them weren't, but a lot of the founding fathers were Christians.
Yeah.
But they believed in the right of people to worship how they wanted to. They believed in their right to be atheists. They believed in their right to be Muslims. They believed in their right.
Whatever gods you wanted.
Exactly, because they understood that our freedoms came from God. So, and to me, I think that's regardless of what your religious beliefs are, regardless of what your beliefs are, that is profound to set up a government like that, whereas most governments before then were monarchies, dictatorships, authoritarians, oligarchies, you name it. Even the pure democracies fail because you got people who are in power who have power and can get a lot of people to agree with them, then they can run roughshod over your rights.
But the thing about it is with the founding fathers, I just want to interject really quickly, is that people have a stigma of just saying that the founding fathers were racist. No, these founding fathers also were landowners, business owners. These people who was writing this Constitution had some stake in what they were writing about as well.
Right.
And they just were not white men. They were Black men in that as well. Black landowners. Everybody wasn't a slave,
Right.
There were a lot of free men, free Black men, that free poor men and women, not women, men, that also contribute to writing that Constitution because they were looking at the fact that it could affect them as being landowners, property owners, business owners. So, sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. No, great point, sis. And for those of you who are watching, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this stream and leave any comments that you have about what we're talking about. So just to get back to some of the major points about majority tyranny, that's democracy. We don't have a pure democracy. We have a representative republic, and the necessity of the union. Some of the framers saw that even though a lot of the states had some of these constitutions about natural rights and natural laws, that they weren't living up to them because the legislature started to get a little tyrannical too. So the framers, and I think what ended up happening was during the Constitutional Congress, they were bringing these things up. One of the things that I learned about was the Federalist Papers. So the Federalist Papers were papers that were written by, Madison. I think Hamilton wrote some of them to make the argument why we should have a constitutional republic. And I would highly recommend that if you get a chance to go read some of the Federalist Papers. These papers are the foundation of our Constitution. Yes. And I think Madison wrote under the name E. Publius. Yes. Was it E. Publius?
That's how you enunciate that.
Publius, I think.
I call him a Publius. Sorry.
So he had a pseudonym that he wrote under to make his points about the Constitution. So there was a lot of back and forth because before the Constitution, there was the Articles of Confederation, but they just weren't working. So the framers got together and decided that, okay, we need to set up a government that will bring the union together, that we can be under one constitution. And the thing about it is our Constitution is the envy of the world. But the funny thing is so many people are trying to destroy it.
Yeah.
Because it does work.
It's
not perfect.
Other countries change over and over and over and over. The United States of America, ours has stayed solid for a very long time.
Yes. So what we talked about was, we did natural rights in the American Revolution, the majority tyranny. Just think about that. And this is one of the things that I always fuss about when I'm talking to people about when they say, this is the democracy. And that just goes to show you, see, our elected officials call this a democracy.
And that's to confuse you.
They are
they know they're doing.
I think so too.
Doing.
I think because you think about it, democracy sounds,
inclusive.
Yes.
Inclusive.
Yes.
When you don't say democracy, you're excluding those from the, because we're all in this together.
Right. It sounds good. Like, oh, democracy. Who can't be for democracy? That's the majority rule. But I think about that. The majority can be tyrannical.
Yes.
It should be about what's right and what's best, regardless of what the majority thinks.
Yeah.
It should be about what's right and what's best. And that's why you have the representatives where they speak for you, and then nothing can be changed on a dime. It has to be through the political process. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So one of the things that we talked about is the consent of the governed and the separation of powers. So the three separate branches of government are co-equal, right? So the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. One is not more powerful than the other. Now, I do remember learning about checks and balances in school.
But see, they're taking that out, and that's a great reason why I love this Dogwood Classical Academy. Their curriculum is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
I remember we used to have Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday. Schoolhouse.
Yes.
I'm only a bill. I can't see today.
I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
That's right.
Y'all want to hear Vic instead of me.
No, I'm done today.
So when we talk about the consent of the government and separation of powers, the method for ongoing consent is voting. Isn't that cool? We didn't even think about that, right? So the method of ongoing consent is voting, because we get to vote those representatives in and out of office. If they're not representing us the way we think they should, in a way that we consent to, we can vote them out. But with what we just saw,
that's what
it's been compromised. So we got to get that back.
But the thing about voting, what people don't know is that when you vote, you're just giving a voice to what you want. You don't make the final decision. Right. The people do, and see, that's the thing. And I think that's what has happened to the country this time around 4 years, is that we voted. The majority said we want this. However, when it went over to the House, it said something different, because that's where the president is really made. Right. In the House. Right. And so it's a lot of history lessons being taught. Right. Excuse me. Within the last months, you should get a real good civics lessons based on what we just saw happen. Yeah. But a lot of it is being covered up. Yeah. So, but it makes people really question. Those who want to know will go and find out. So that's the awesome thing. Yeah. So another part of the consent of the governed is separation of parties. Both consent and natural rights have to be present to have a Republican government. That's what we have. Representative Republican government. And when you think about the Electoral College, this is why I favor the Electoral College, because it prevents majority rule turning tyrannical. Because you got to think about it. If it was majority rules, I like that. Now that each state is majority rules, right? So you vote for your governor and stuff like that by the majority. But each state, when it comes to the national level, only gets so many votes. Because you got to think about it. New York and California will be determining who the president is all the time. Yes. The people on the coast, those of us in the middle or in the South, we would have no say. Yeah. And I think it protects everybody. And you think about it, California has 55 electoral votes. That's a lot. And they want to keep it. And that's the reason why every time you do your census, that census play in the part of who goes into your Congress, how many seats they get. That's by the numbers of people that is living in your state through the census. Right. That's the reason why they push for people in those blue states to do the census, because it keeps them with a hold. You know me, I'm going to go in. Yeah. It keeps a hold on those states of making big decisions when it comes down to, like you said, California and New York. Yeah. That's so, I mean, if you really want to have fair representation, that's something that you got to, I know everybody think democracy is good. And as a matter of fact, one of the points that was made when I was taking this class is that historically Democrat governments vacillated between tyranny and anarchy. It was either the tyrannical majority or the anarchy.
majority. I can anarchical, whatever.
Anarchical.
Y'all know what I mean. Anarchy means no government at all, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there were factions of majority and minority. Representative republics protect the minority. That's just really what it does. It protects the minority from being taken advantage of by the majority. You want that. It's not that the minority has the bigger voice. The minority just is protected. And I think that's fair. So the institutions are structured so that human ambition can check human ambition. Mm-hmm. Think about it. We see it now when you got the powerful, the corporatists and stuff. They're protecting their interests. We ain't even talk about what's going on with Robin Hood and the whole GameStop, that thing. Rules for thee, but not for me, right? That kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, and if fathers, this is what I love. The founding fathers understand if men were angels, no government would be needed. I love that part because you got to think about.
That's right. That's right.
So one of the things that the government is for is to secure the rights, these rights, property, morality, and religion. That's basically what the government's for.
Yeah, because you want first of all, I'm telling you, I love my Glock.
Yeah.
Okay? Because you come on my property, I'm not going to have time to call the police. Okay?
Right.
But my amendment right gives me a opportunity
to protect myself exactly.
And my family, my home, if you step across that threshold.
And check this out, y'all. Y'all want to have that Second Amendment because that's one of the reasons America doesn't get attacked on our homeland because they know that we're well armed.
Even the citizens are well armed,
that's exactly
not just the military.
Exactly. Not only do we have a powerful military, the citizens are armed. Mm-hmm. So the fundamental means of securing our natural rights is number one, our armed forces to address and protect against external threats, right? And then criminal law to address and protect against internal threats, right? And then it also gives us the right to secure and to acquire and possess property. That's one of the general fundamental rights we have in this country.
Yeah.
A lot of other countries don't have that. When we first got started, only rich people, look, check this out. Only people who own property can vote.
That's right. That's right. And you know what? People, listen, they come from all over. They come here and they can buy property. Mm-hmm. You go over there to that Crown. Yeah. See what you're buying.
Yeah.
You're not buying anything because everything that's over in Europe, it belongs to the Crown. And so when people talk about, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, you got to be a citizen in those particular countries in order to even buy property in that country. You go over there to these Caribbean countries and stuff like that. You can't just buy property in all of these Caribbean countries because you're not a citizen. But people come here and make the American dream happen right here. Okay, people.
Yeah.
I'm sick, but I ain't that sick.
So then we come to the whole issue of slavery. So this was addressed in this course, and I love it.
Oh, Lord.
So the lecture, that particular lecture, was about slavery and the roots of the succession crisis. Because remember, the Civil War started over that. Like a lot of people try to say it's about states' rights. It was kind of, but it was really about slavery, right? And so what did the founders do about slavery? When we became a country, slavery still existed, right? Mm-hmm. But the founders, understood that slavery is wrong and on principle. And Madison and Hamilton referred to slaves as men. So they knew that it was wrong, right? What did they do about slavery during the founding? 9 states actually became free states. All states upward from Pennsylvania became free states. Ohio in 1803 and Vermont came into the Union as free states. Slave laws were eased in slave states where owners had the right to free individual slaves if they wanted. As a result, thousands of slaves were freed. Mm-hmm. So there were some things in place. Why did they not do more? Okay. Because of self-interest, which is part of human nature, which is one of the things they address. We don't call a spade, even though they did some good things, they did some things wrong. They were human beings. Sometimes we look to other human beings to be, godlike and do everything right, but they're not.
But they weren't the only ones that had slaves. There were black landowners who had slaves. Who had slaves. And there's one, I forgot this. My brain is not working well today. Black gentleman. He had more slaves than the white in his area. In the South.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you know, you have, if you are a business owner and you have a staff, those are your slaves. No. You just call them employees. I'm sorry.
Now another reason slaves that get free,
but you gotta pay them.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, but there's slavery going on now. Why do you think the corporatists want the illegal immigrants to come? Because they can basically pay them slave wage. Exactly.
Slave labor, because the wage that they give them,
and that's not a left or right thing.
It's not even enough for them to sustain themselves in a place to have a room and board, please.
Yeah. So, and then one of the other things, I love taking this course. It was so much stuff I found out. One of the other things that went wrong is that a lot of the slave owners were afraid of the slave insurrection. So that's why they didn't want to free them, because they felt like if they freed the slaves, the slaves was going to
rebel.
You know, can you say Nat Turner? So they were afraid. So those were some of the things that were at play at the time. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right?
Yeah.
And then the founders actually found a place to tolerate slavery, but it also placed it on the road to extinction, which means the amendment process, remember? But however, in the southern states, progress toward abolition began to slow and reverse. Because I was just listening to a documentary the other day about Mississippi and how big it was. The cotton was king back then. And Mississippi, to this day, people were rich. There was a huge movement of slaves to Mississippi. And even to this day, Mississippi is 40% black. Yeah. It's one of the blackest states. I think it has the biggest black population in the country.
Yes, and it has the largest poverty rate, and it's also, with education, is the lowest state for children graduating out of high school. And also you have Louisiana, another state that was big on that as well. So so cotton was king back then. And just like human nature, and I'm not making an excuse for it, but it is what it is. The South didn't want to give up their money, even if it meant having slaves, even if they knew it was wrong. So unfortunately, that was one of the root causes of. So when we talk about succession in the Civil War, slavery was the primary cause. They want to talk about states' rights, but it was the primary cause. But the thing about it is, if you're diabetic, you don't want to give up your sugar, right? You really kill yourself because of the sugar you want to keep on eating. Okay, so it's just like sometimes people look at things in one perspective, and then they look at something else in another perspective with their own self, their own lives. And that's something that, we always need to examine going forward.
Now, here's something interesting in my notes. When we talk about succession in the Civil War, something about Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was a black abolitionist, and he actually started the Republican Party with other abolitionists. So the Republican Party was started by black folk. And the first representatives to Congress after the Civil War were black Republicans.
Yes. And when we exclude this, we exclude a large portion of our black history. And these are the things that I used to always, I hated black history. I'm just going to tell you a little story. I used to hate black history as I was teaching. Because we seen the same people. Rosa Parks wasn't the first person to sit on that refused to give her a seat. It was a little black girl from high school. She was only 16. No one talks about her.
Right.
That's the real person who broke that barrier.
Right.
Okay, y'all go and y'all look that up. Okay. However, we talk about Rosa Parks. We talk about Martin Luther King. There's things about Martin Luther King that some people don't like. But they don't talk about Frederick Douglass. They don't talk about Carver. I'm talking about people that really made a significant impact on us breaking out of slavery. We broke out of slavery only to enter into slavery in the 60s. So let's see. I'm sorry. I know
she's telling the truth. Look, I just had a little bit of an epiphany because I got a lot of notes. We may have to do a part 2.
We may do a part 2 on this
because this lesson on the Constitution brings us all the way up to post 60s.
Yeah.
So we come up until the recent history into the 60s and the 70s.
Mhm.
So, and there's a lot in between. So, but I think we probably will do
a
part two to this, because I still got like
there's so many
5
notes.
pages of notes.
And it's like the Constitution. See, the thing about the Constitution, because see, this was supposed to be her teaching, because I'm under the weather for my sinus infection. I let it go dormant. I just didn't take care of it the way I should have, because I have bad allergies. But the Constitution is not a class that you can just learn from like 1, 2, 3. No, like I said in the beginning, we're turning on the light for you, because we want to show you the door. Now you're going to have to open that door, because you know what? You got to start putting on your critical brain, that critical thinking.
Right.
And you got to start training that mind, that brain now to do some research. Okay. It's not going to come to you just 1, 2, 3. You're going to have to do research. And Kim has put together a great piece here from her training from Hillsdale. Okay. So we want you guys to get a notepad, pen, write these dates down, names down, and go out and start searching this. And it's just not for, we want our parents. I'm talking to the parents.
We got to know this history.
You got to know this history. Don't leave it up to these teachers to teach you this history. It is dead.
According to the teachers now, America is a race. America's not perfect. That's not our argument at all.
We know it's not perfect.
But our government is one of the best foundations to be built on that allows us free. Because America is the only country that has ever freed its slaves. Yes. So let me read this to you. This is some great notes. I wanted to read this because it's about the succession in the Civil War. And you'll hear a lot. You won't hear some of these details. Okay. Mm-hmm. So slavery was the primary cause of the Civil War, which was nothing less than struggle to save or destroy Republican government and equal natural rights. Because we talk about natural rights, don't the slaves have them too? Don't the slaves have them too, right? So, okay, I'm just...
Because they're supposed to teach this. And if you want to get biblical, okay, guys, y'all gonna put me here. If you want to get biblical, because I did study that, it said in the Bible that you're supposed to treat your slaves, landowners, slave owners, treat your slaves good. Mm-hmm. And any slave master who didn't treat their slave good was an infidel. You know why? He's stupid, because he done invest all that money in a slave only to brutalize it and beat it. So sometimes when you see these little imageries on TV, be very careful with that. Right. Because beating your slave, that means if you beat them to a pulp where they couldn't work, that means that's $1 out of your pocket. A smart businessman ain't gonna be whipping and tearing into his money where it's going to bring him revenue. So just be very careful with some of the imagery we see on TV that may not be correct history. It's an emotional grab. Mm-hmm. Okay, slavery was wrong. It was detestable. But however, let's get the correct history so that we can move forward. Go ahead, Kim.
So Frederick Douglass was a Black abolitionist who opposed slavery, of course, and argued that a total reconstruction of society was the only way to destroy it. The nature of tyranny is to expand. It must grow to maintain and keep power. Think about that when we're looking at the government grow. One notices that in the pro-slavery South, and begin to support a police state and begin to export the ideology throughout the states, it became dangerous to openly denounce slavery. All freestanding institutions became a threat to slavery. Lincoln argued before becoming president and before the Civil War that the only way to satisfy the South would be to adopt and embrace their ideology that slavery is right. In doing so, we give up our conviction that slavery is wrong. Both Lincoln and Douglass understood that slavery was a poison to society and it threatened to destroy the republic. When Lincoln was elected on an anti-slavery platform, it signaled to the Southern states that a president can be elected without their votes. Think about that. Because they thought they would be able to win the election. They thought they had enough power. And they began to secede. They laid out their understanding of the Constitution, right? States' rights are sovereign. This was the South's argument. States' rights are sovereignty, dual sovereignty, or divided sovereignty. Individual state secession, each state may decide if the treaty, the Constitution, had been violated. In their arguments, the Southern states didn't use the main point of the contention to this day. They didn't even use that as a contention, but their main argument was the Fugitive Slave Act, which really, the Fugitive Slave Act was where if a slave was a fugitive, they used to be able to, I believe, request that the slaves be brought back to the South, but they weren't, the North wasn't enforcing it. So that was one of the reasons they wanted to secede, but it had nothing to do with that. That was their false argument.
They used that also as the switch.
Right. So the original fugitive laws didn't protect true free Black citizens because, as a matter of fact, you could be a free Black citizen in the North, and if you got captured, they would ship you back to the South, even though you were free. So the Union stopped supporting that, and that was the South's argument to secede from the Union. They don't really use it. It was all about slavery. So this is some interesting stuff, and when you look at it, so the election of Lincoln, and you got to understand why he was assassinated. There's always this comparison between Lincoln and Trump. Lincoln upset the status quo, right? He was anti-slavery. And then, of course, with him being the executive in chief, he had a lot of influence, right? So he can appoint judges and other, officials that were anti-slavery, and the South saw this as a threat to their livelihood. So that was one of the things that really, really prompted them to start to secede from the Union. And in spite of how Lincoln felt, he felt like it was very important to save the Union. So, but that was very interesting at that time, that the South tried to use the argument that the Fugitive Slave Act was their reason for wanting to secede. They really didn't. They said it, but they really wanted to keep their way of life. There was one prolific politician, orator, or whatever. His name was Calhoun, that argued for slavery. He was very charismatic. He was a progressive, and he really, if you listen to him and if you didn't have critical thinking skills, you would think, oh, slavery ain't that bad, right? unless you the slave. Exactly. And he actually made the argument that, slaves were subhuman, and that it was good for slaves to have our white slave masters because they'll take care of us. How crazy is that? Hey, Lisa, I see you. How crazy is that? If you think about it, he literally made that argument. So when we think about this country and the Constitution and all of the things that we've gone through to get to the Civil War, I highly recommend again that as we're winding down, because there's got to be a part 2, because I got a whole bunch of notes left that I really want to go over. So I think we're going to do a part 2 next week where we actually get into progressivism and the rejection of our founding and how we got there, starting with the Woodrow Wilson presidency. That stuff is
Bianca's.
It is, when I was reading this, and this will help you understand progressivism. That under that umbrella comes socialism, Marxism, all of that. It's all rooted in the same ideology. And it has started to infiltrate. It was actually literally brought into this country during that era in the 1920s with the election of Woodrow Wilson. I believe he was labeled the first progressive president. FDR was one as well, even Theodore Roosevelt. And then progressivism didn't have a ROD. I think Theodore Roosevelt was a Republican, but he was progressive. So that ideology started to creep into our institutions and has been. That's why I always say to, conservatives, they've been fighting this war, setting this up for the last 100 years. We just now really getting hip to it. And one of the ways they started it, of course, was in the government institutions, in academia, in media, in entertainment. You got to think these are like the main pillars of society. And if they've infiltrated there, that they have a lot of power. And when we really, that's why at this channel, we're big on education.
We're big on turning on that light bulb.
So
you can see the door, and that you can open that door and you can walk out and then start thinking critically.
That's right. That's right. So our goal is to help educate the people who come to this channel seeking educational excellence. That's always been our goal, is to educate people about basic things like civics and about civics and just basic knowledge about this country, how it was founded. These things are no longer taught in the schools. You know, the charter school that's coming,
Dogwood Classical Academy.
if you live in North Carolina, I'm going to link that. Once we're finished with the live, I'm trying to figure out how to link that in the description,
so that you guys can, if you're interested, like I said, I gave you the
give
number.
Me time though, guys.
You know, we also will be sending you. We will also put that number that I was reading prior to coming on. I will also do that for you. I will repeat that number again so that you can have that number, so that you could reach out to the school and have that as well, which is really good.
Yes. So, but we appreciate you guys being here today, being on the live. Please like, share, subscribe. Any comments that you have, tell your friends about it. They can come back and look at this later. We will be doing a part 2 next week. I'll be finishing up. There's a lot of great information here. Like I said, this was a presentation I did last year with one of our local groups here. I learned a lot. I believe the group learned a lot from it, and there's still a lot more to learn to see how we've progressed. And just to make a point right quick that I learned from progressors, and we'll be closing out here in a minute.